The Fallout show has finally returned. Oh yes, God Howard's master plan to keep Fallout relevant after over a decade of no games. It's supposed to keep you excited as a Fallout fan and fill the gap until the release of the next game, which is somewhere in between 2030s and the heat death of the universe at this point. The first season already made history as the first ever TV show to be entirely written by ChatGPT. And after its massive success amongst people who have never played a Fallout game before, and its show of absolute respect for the Fallout canon and lore, it's back for a second season, baby. But since it didn't totally destroy and retcon everything the game's built up, the second season comes to finish the job. And oh boy, I'm so excited to consume. There is one problem though. I'm not gonna pay the evil bald man. So how do I go about acquiring it? The very first scene of Season 2 starts with union workers beating up a Mr. Handy robot. And this is where I understood what the writers are doing to the Fallout lore and where they are going with the plot of the season. They just take everything that was the current thing in the past couple of years and turn it into the core of their political propaganda. In this case, it's a commentary on AI and automation of jobs, of course. And why do I say this? Because there is no evidence in the Fallout lore that people in-universe rebelled against the robots and didn't like them. In fact, quite the opposite. Seems like the robots were pretty cheap to make, that even normal middle-class people had them in their homes as their assistants, as we see literally in the intro of Fallout 4. But of course, the writers don't care about that. After all, this show is not a thoughtful and accurate depiction of the Fallout universe made by lifelong fans and dedicated nerds of the video games, because they constantly retcon and destroy the lore and universe building of the game. And it's not a product made by more recent fans of Fallout either, aka tourists who have only played the Bethesda games. Because even beloved factions like the Brotherhood are destroyed and portrayed as incompetent for the sake of advancing the plot. No, this show is written by politically motivated Hollywood writers who are apathetic to the Fallout canon.
Instead of having people be awesome, why not have them be dumb?
They only care about this show insofar as it's a vehicle for their political propaganda, which is why in the scene right after, we will see the beginning of character assassination of Robert House that lasts for the rest of the show. And it's so disgusting. Basically what they're doing is just projecting their own envy and hate for Elon Musk onto House, and basically turning House into the current thing equivalent. And ironically, what they're doing shows they have no media literacy, since you're totally ignoring the original material, the lore, for your own political agenda. And also, what you're doing is so dystopian when you take an author's work and hijack it like this. When he himself has said that Fallout is not about capitalism, then you take it and turn it into this visual and narrative abortion of a show, and spit it in the face of fans who actually like Fallout for its universe and lore. Now, first of all, I have to address the double house situation that caused a lot of speculations and an insane amount of cope from the glazers of the show. So in this scene, our totally not House starts a fight with the workers who are mad at the evil capitalists, and he lures them in a back alley where he tests his supposed mind control device on them. So he puts it on one of them and makes him beat the shit out of his friends, and then makes his head explode like a cartoon villain. Now, at first, many coping defenders of this show said that this guy is not the real Mr. House, and actually is his brother, Anthony House. and that's because in the scene he's glazing the H&H nail gun, and we know from reading the computer logs inside the ruins of H&H Tools Company that its owner is Anthony House, who is Robert House's half-brother. And that's why he's a cartoonishly evil maniac. I mean, they would never do that to the real House, right? Of course they would! You think the same writers who didn't even bother to get the most important and superficial things about the lore right in the first season would all of a sudden care to go and dig up some esoteric lore inside computer logs of Fallout New Vegas so they would know about Robert House's brother? Of course not! It turns out that the other House was just his body double. And it's not even explained who he is, it's just some guy because, well, you know, House is a cartoon villain and evil people have body doubles because they're all evil or something. This show is literally written by 10-year-olds. And there are still people out there defending it. So now it's clear that Mr. House is played by this guy, who is, believe it or not, also the business card guy in American Psycho. I guess it's appropriate because the show is turning House into an American Psycho. Oh yeah, and keep that stupid mind control device in mind because it's going to become the main plot device of this season. Now, I know nobody cares about power creep in sci-fi anymore, but suffice to say, this device totally breaks the lore of Fallout. Like, if it actually existed, it would change the course of history in the Fallout canon. But of course, nobody cares. This show is just Borderlands at this point. Wow, look, his head hacking exploded. Haha, so funny. In the next scene, we go back to current time to see the first depiction of the Mojave in this show. And immediately we see that Novak's dino statue is facing the wrong way. Well, that's a good start. And then we are reminded of Lucy, our heckin' wholesome vault dweller character, and the fact that she hasn't learned anything from the Wasteland after a whole season. And she starts to debate with the Khans, who are depicted as basically a bunch of brain-dead raiders. Again, this show has no respect for any of the factions on the surface, not even the big ones, let alone the Khans. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. Then we have the Ghoul, remember him? The actual main character from the previous season? Well, he's still an unkillable Gary Stu as he survives literally being hanged and suffocated. Just a reminder that the ghouls are not supposed to be literally unkillable. If that was the case, then you wouldn't be able to kill hundreds of ghouls that are in every single dungeon in Fallout games. Sure, they can heal most of their injuries, but it's only at the cost of exposing themselves to more radiation, which would accelerate them going feral. But of course, the writers retconned a magical product last season that nullifies all those consequences, so who cares? Anyways, finally, the fight actually breaks out and Lucy starts shooting people in the foot because she doesn't want to murder people. May I remind you that this is the Wasteland? There are no field medics around. By shooting people in the foot, you're not doing them any favors. You're just ensuring that they're going to die a slow and agonizing death from blood loss. A shot to the head would at least end their suffering. And this, by the way, is where we start to see that Lucy is written like an incompetent psychopath. Not a smart, scheming one like they make House to be, but someone whose thoughtlessness and naivete led her to commit cruel acts without intent. Trust me, she keeps doing this over and over during the season alone, and we are supposed to have sympathy for her because she is just la heckin' naive vaulty or something. Then the show cuts back to the vaults, as the writers suddenly remember the missing water chip subplot, which was supposed to be just a shallow, member-berry reference to Fallout games, just like many other things in this show. But in this case, they are forced to continue this pointless plot, and oh boy, the one thing you can always count on this show is that things will only ever get more cartoonishly stupid. So we have this blabbering idiot, Reg McPhee, which I only know his name because of the Amazon info cards, since he's as forgettable as anybody else in this show. And he is told by the Overseer to start a club just to keep him from destroying shit, and then he goes on to make the Products of Inbreeding support group. Now, you're probably asking, why am I even covering this in detail? This is one of those Family Guy style cutaway gags in the show, right? There's no way there's more to it. Well, would you believe me if I told you that this is actually an influential plot with an eventual climax? Well, of course you would, because this is Looney Tunes. This is a cartoon. This is what the show is. In fact, this whole subplot describes perfectly the level of seriousness of the show, and also the level of intelligence of its supporters. Speaking of Products of Inbreeding, remember this guy? Norm McFuckface, or whatever his name was? Yeah, he is still stuck in the chamber with the stupid brain on a Roomba, dude. The more I remember the plot points of the previous season, I just can't understand how anyone with a functioning brain can still like this show. Anyways, He finally understands that he could just kick the damn thing and get rid of it, and he opens all the cryopods. In the next scene, we see Lucy and the fence zombie, who are following Lucy's dad's literal footprints in the sand to find him. Dude, if you just remove all the gore from this show, this could be the plot of the next Minions movie. Then they find this shack, where a granny is selling flea soup. This is the moment that broke me. Like, if you don't immediately understand what's wrong with this, you're not a Fallout fan. This is a stupid in another level. Walking down the same desert in New Vegas, the real game, you see geckos you can hunt, you see banana plants and cacti with fruit. If you have ever played any Fallout game on hardcore, you have to eat these to survive. In fact, in the first tutorial quest of New Vegas, Sunny tells you about all of this. You can make food at the campfire, crafting healing powder from xander roots you find, etc. And you are telling me in the same wasteland there are people who are eating fleas? That literally doesn't have any nutritional value, by the way. You can't survive on that. It's just a comic relief Borderlands joke that the writers who never played a Fallout game and have no respect for its lore and universe just shoehorned in because they only care about this show insofar as it's a vehicle for their political propaganda. Speaking of propaganda, Lucy and the ghoul get to a vault, where it looks like they have been brainwashing people into becoming Chinese communists. By the way, China is still the elephant in the room that has not been addressed in all of this show. You know, as one of the actors that could have had a part in the ending of the war, just saying. But of course, we can't lose all those precious Amazon Prime subscribers in China, so I'm pretty sure that's never gonna get explained. Then we get this Joker-esque scene, where of course Lucy's dad has already been in the vault and sends a message to her to go back home through this brainwashed guy and makes his head explode in front of her. Hank is probably the most nonsensical character in this whole show, because they want to show him as being this murderer maniac, which is at the same time also so well-dressed and well-spoken and insanely competent. And he actually has a vision for the wasteland. Well, at least he works for someone who does. As he enters this special vault, he calls his boss, and they try to make it mysterious. We don't really know who's behind the phone, you know? Could it be that it's House? Could it be that it's another actor? I wonder who could that be? The first scene of the next episode opens with a brainwashed guy as he brings in a cartoon-sized nuclear device into Shady Sands, the capital of the NCR, by the way. And he does it totally unnoticed. Nobody stops his car to check it, there are no checkpoints or anything. Again, if the NCR is this incompetent, maybe they deserve to be nuked out of existence. Maybe Hank has a point after all. Then we get another joke reference scene where Maximus's parents tell him to go hide inside a fridge. There's an Easter egg in New Vegas, by the way, where we can find what's supposed to be Indiana Jones's corpse inside a fridge, making fun of the fourth movie. Basically, they are mocking the idea that you could survive a nuke inside a fridge. It's sad to see a franchise that once mocked Hollywood movies for being unrealistic has now itself turned into a Hollywood tier joke. Then we go back to Dumb and Dumber, where Lucy tries to lecture the ghoul on the golden rule. Treat others as you like to be treated. Now obviously the ghoul just rolls his eyes because he has lived 200 years in the real world. The question is, how come Lucy still believes in this after spending what I assume has been months on the surface and seeing the reality with her own eyes? Again, she has had no character development whatsoever during all of the last season. So of course, when they come across a bunch of what are then revealed to be Legion slaves, and the ghoul doesn't want to help them, what does she do? Well, we don't have to wait too long to figure that out, because the slaves were poisoned, and we immediately get a heckin' epic fight scene with the rat scorpions. And Lucy, instead of trusting her partner, which by the way, without him, she would have been dead 10 times over, she wouldn't last 5 minutes in the wasteland alone. So she just casually betrays him and doesn't give him the last stim pack they had. Instead, she gives it to this unknown woman that they just met, and she has no idea about who she is. Again, she has learned nothing. That woman, she could immediately betray you after you save her, which is exactly what happens, by the way, as she directs Lucy to the slave camp without telling her, and of course she gets captured. Lucy is the ultimate allegory for a modern-day liberal Karen, where she gets to have luxury beliefs, do the most stupid and insane shit possible, and always be shielded of any consequences, thanks to a cuck beta male provider. Anyways, now we get to the other plot of this episode, which marks the beginning of the destruction of Brotherhood of Steel during this season. Now, just a little preamble here. As you know, Brotherhood has always been depicted as mostly good and competent, even in Bethesda games like Fallout 3 and 4. They are supposed to be the moral opposite to the Enclave, whom are the evil and corrupt Illuminati. So, like the Empire versus the Rebels. In Fallout 3, they beat the Enclave fair and square in the capital wasteland, and now By the end of season 1, they got their hands on literally infinite energy. And I don't even want to get into how stupid the idea of infinite energy is, because that's what we are working with now. This is what they turned Fallout into. It's not my fault. Now, given this situation, what do you think the Brotherhood is going to do in the course of this season? A. Finally reunite the West and East chapters. B. Reclaim Mojave and California after the fall of the NCR. C. Locate and destroy the remnants of the Enclave. Ding ding, the answer is D. They're gonna start a civil war. What, you thought the show was gonna get serious for a second? After all of this, and you still have hope that something can be salvaged from this train wreck of a show? Of course not, you clueless cattle. They're literally just gonna piss in your mouth, and you gotta drink it and say, nice, it's Todd's beer. So long story short, they find Area 51, which has all the weapons they need to achieve all their plans. Then we get this montage of Brotherhood soldiers being cartoonishly stupid. Now this scene right here is Fallout show's equivalent of a Family Guy cutaway gag, because they use this alien being inside the icebox as the setup for a joke, but they never pick up on it again. Now remember, aliens aren't really confirmed to be real in the Fallout universe. Sure, you have the Mothership Zeta DLC, and you have all the Wild Wasteland stuff, but all of that is as serious as the Red Dead Redemption Zombie DLC. And Wild Wasteland is supposed to be hallucinations, it's just Easter eggs that they wanted to put in the game. But we're not hallucinating here, we are seeing it for a fact that there is an alien inside that fridge, but that doesn't matter. They don't build up on that because this is just a Family Guy cutaway gag, you know? Where Peter in one scene gets his limbs cut off and then by the end of the episode everything is back to normal, right? That's the kind of writing we're dealing with here. Then they blow up a nice car they just found for funsies? Wait, so how are they any better than Raiders and Fiends? They are supposed to be the ones who understand technology, and they don't even know what a car is? Again, these are the good guys that their armor is the cover of every single Bethesda-made Fallout, and they are turning them into this incompetent retards. Just for a second, put yourself in the shoes of a normie cattle who actually likes this show. Who are you even supposed to root for at this point? Anyways, back to the Civil War plot. So Quintus, the elder of this chapter, has gathered all the other chapters of the West Coast to unite them against the Commonwealth chapter. Why, you may ask? Because they just don't want to share this infinite energy with the Commonwealth. What? It's supposed to be infinite. If you share it literally with everyone, it doesn't run out. You can always have as much energy as you want, because infinity wouldn't become less if you give it to others. This is where you understand that people who wrote this show have a combined IQ of 67. Finally, back to Lucy's brother, where he unfreezes the future Vault-Tec employees, poses as being Bud Askin's successor, and orders them all to evacuate to the surface. Conveniently, the vault happens to have a comically oversized ventilation shaft that leads straight outside, because obviously there's no chance radiation could ever pour through it and kill everyone. Who cares? It's Borderlands at this point. Okay, moving on to episode 3, where we see this time around the Legion being narratively slaughtered by the show. This is the least surprising one. They're supposed to be the Chads faction after all, but they have never been depicted as incompetent as we are about to see in this episode. Even some Wasteland traders admitted that the Legion is better than nothing. Caravans weren't being raided by bandits and fiends. Sure, people had to bow to totalitarian lunatics, but at the least, as they say, they made the trains run on time. And this made me think of something insane that I never thought about in this way, but I feel like the courier that we were playing as in New Vegas has unknowingly committed dysgenics in the Wasteland by killing everyone who was remotely competent. I mean, that's the only way of making sense of what's happening in this show. Anyways, Lucy is led to this Legion camp with the slave woman, and immediately you notice something. All the Legion members are white, unlike the other factions that are all diversity squads. I'm sure this is just a coincidence. The second thing you notice is that apparently the Legion is also in the middle of a civil war. Also, both Legion factions are tied together. Their camps are literally connected. More cartoon shit, of course, and they're fighting over Caesar's corpse. He has a note naming the next Caesar, but neither side will let the other one read it. Oh, I'm sure this plot point won't turn into an even bigger joke in the final episode. In the next scene, we see a man who appears to be Legathlanius, or at least is wearing his helmet. And it turns out to be the Home Alone kid, and he terminates the slave girl just for the shock value, of course, because that's what this show is about. It's just a gore. Now get ready for the most cringe part of this show. When Lucy is brought before the Kaiser and has a Reddit nerd out over Latin.
Kaiser? Do you mean Caesar? I believe Kaisers were German, and you guys have more of a Roman theme, so I think it's Caesar.
And she is wrong, by the way. Classical Latin did not have a soft C. It was always pronounced as K. And I love how they talk about prima noctis in the next sentence, which literally has that hard C in it because it's an old Latin word. You just know the scriptwriters are just so low IQ and full of themselves that they didn't even see their own stupidity. Also, this Reddit soy out destroys the tension completely. Like, why wouldn't you just slit her throat right there and then? Like that slave chick? Well, it's all established that she's not going to suffer any consequences of her actions, so that's that. Hence, the Beta Bucks Deluxe School shows up in the right time and saves Lucy by ratting out the last hideout of the NCR in the region. And, of course, he also burns them down for good measure. He's just that badass, right? And the Legion are cartoonishly stupid, so of course nobody notices. So they think the other side has started it. Also, I totally skipped the Cooper Howard's flashback scene because it was totally useless, except that it introduces this generic congresswoman character. And it's gonna be, something by the end. Don't you worry, we'll get there. In the meantime, we can cover the rest of Brotherhood Humiliation. Back to the Brotherhood meeting from the last episode, and it's cut short because a representative from the Commonwealth shows up out of nowhere. And this is where we get the very first interesting political power struggle of the show, because this Commonwealth envoy knight starts chatting up Maximus, who is also a knight, and wants to encourage him to rebel against his elder. He talks about how in the Commonwealth, it's the knights and paladins who run the show because they are the ones who put their life on the table, but over here, the elders and the clerics seem to have all of the power. Again, this is something as old as time, the power struggle between the priest class and the army, and again, they dangle the keys in front of you. Maybe, just maybe, there is one more chance to salvage this and go back to the original point of Fallout and why it's interesting to many people. The political struggle, war never changes, right? Also, maybe this Maximus character, who's supposed to be one of the main characters of the show, by the way, but his contribution to the story and his role until this point is akin to Johnny in Metal Gear series. But maybe, just maybe, he can finally redeem himself? Of course, what was I thinking? It only gets worse. So Maximus goes on a little trip with the envoy, and they stumble upon Max's ghoulified squire friend from the last season. And he is running a child labor factory, basically. The Commonwealth envoy wants to eradicate the ghoulified children. Maximus makes this morally profound decision to kill him. Again, literally Looney Tunes style, with a hammer to the head, and betray and destroy his own faction for a bunch of ghouls. Which, by the way, in the Brotherhood Codex, they are to be treated as abominations. Again, this is just virtue signaling. Those ghoul kids are first of all suffering themselves because they're gonna turn into ghouls and lose their humanity, basically. But also, as they turn in this factory, they're going to kill and ghoulify the rest of the kids who are not ghouls, spreading the misery. So how is this a moral decision? Of course it's not. You thought Maximus was going to make an important decision for the first time in his life? Of course not. This show is incredibly racist toward black people and insinuates that they can never make a rational and important decision in their lives, and they don't deserve to be in positions of power. Anyways, let's just move on and into the breakdown of episode 4. The episode opens with a flashback to Anchorage, Alaska. Up to this point, the show has avoided directly naming China as America's enemy, leaning instead on vague references to communism, but here we see Chinese soldiers. And the leader of their squad is a woman? Now I hereby demand our glorious leader Xi to ban this disgusting subversive show in China and evaporate Jeff Bezos himself for insulting the glorious Red Army by suggesting that they are libtards and would ever put a woman in charge of anything. Anyways, Cooper Howard, the sissy American pig, gets mag-dumped by the Chinese Chads, but of course, the plot armor comes to save him again, even in the flashbacks, as we see a massive Deathclaw come and wipe the floor with the commies. Now here, I would have said that a cold-blooded lizard creature like a Deathclaw wouldn't survive the cold of Alaska, but we're way past that at this point. We all know this is a cartoon. In fact, in the next scene, we go back to see how they're gonna clean up the mess Maximus made in the last episode. So Maximus makes his ghoul bud wear the dead guy's power armor, and you already know where this is going. Because of course, everyone in the Brotherhood now has the intelligence and situational awareness of a typical Metal Gear Solid NPC, so no one notices him acting cartoonish and bizarre for the entire episode, except of course Max's friend, who spots it immediately. Now, I'm not going to bore you too much with what happens minute by minute in this episode. It's mostly filler, and it's just about the action war scene, which is nice visually, if you could ignore everything else. So Max's friend, who is the only person in Brotherhood not infected by this sudden stupidity virus, casually steals the very thing the entire war is about. You know, the cold fusion thing, and of course no one is securing it. There are no guards. And in the scene right after that, one of the Brotherhood chapter leaders informs everyone that the cold fusion was stolen. So of course they all just start killing each other, like insane savages. Yeah, that's totally normal for the Brotherhood, right? And here we go, this scene is basically the death of Brotherhood of Steel, at least on the West Coast. full-blown civil war over literally nothing. Nobody said, oh, let's investigate, let's see who did it. No, of course not. Let's just kill each other, because that's what Fallout is about, right? Now, as all of this mess unfolds, Maximus confronts his elder and admits to killing the envoy and effectively starting a civil war, and then he wants to kill him too? Yes, that's genuinely the plan. Why, you might ask? Let's hear him explain it.
You have a plan. You have plans. They don't choose to do the things they have to do. They just keep happening.
This guy is supposed to be the hero of the show, by the way. And the Elder is visibly perplexed, actually asking why he would do this. But once he realizes it was all to save a bunch of ghouls, he just crashes out, and it's absolutely valid, by the way, and starts mag-dumping him. And of course, Maximus, being a pussy, just bails out. This is how the show is treating its main black character, by the way. Not only he's stupid and incompetent, but he's also a pussy. I swear, this show is unironically racist. As for the final plotline, we have Lucy and the ghoul again. Not much happens except that she becomes addicted to Buffout, which makes her act even more like a psychopath than she already does. So when they finally arrive in Freeside, she just starts killing the ghoulified kings while she's high on Buffout. Now, why the kings turned into ghouls? Who knows? The rest of Freeside, as we see in the next episode, is perfectly fine. Even the king's school of impersonation is untouched. I mean, it's obvious, they're just mocking them as a faction. I think someone said the kings are the perfect example that Fallout isn't supposed to be serious, even in New Vegas. Well, that couldn't be further from the truth. The kings were just a tribe amongst many that ended up settling in Freeside.
Understand, Freeside? You have to look back a few years. Originally, we were all just tribes making a living in this area. That all changed when Mr. House came around. He made an offer to the 3 biggest tribes that were willing to listen to him.
And when they stumbled upon the School of Impersonation, inside they tried to make sense of the material they found and realized that maybe this guy was once a king, you know? People worshipped him, dressed like him, acted like him.
Near as I can tell, it was some sort of religious institution. Oh, I know it says school out front, but everything in here seems to be related to the worship of some guy from back in the day. People used to come here to learn about him, to dress like him, move like him, to be him. If that's not worship, I don't know what is.
It's a perfect example of a cargo cult, when people in the distant future rediscover things from the past that are completely alien to them. They imitate them, hoping to replicate their power. Actually, in real life, untouched tribespeople did this when they saw planes dropping supplies. They built fake airstrips and towers thinking that would bring them more cargo. The kings in Fallout are similar. They dress and act like Elvis, people who didn't know about and don't understand, imitating rituals and appearances in hope of recreating something they can't fully grasp. So no, the kings are actually serious. They are not supposed to be the punchline for a joke. Haha, funny Elvis people. No, they actually have character, more character than any of the supposedly serious depictions of main factions in this show. Anyways, that was it for this abortion of an episode. Moving on to episode 5, where Lucy and the Fent zombie finally enter the strip and discover it's riddled with Deathclaws. After realizing there's nothing they can do about it, and a whole Jurassic Park-esque scene which makes no sense, they go back to Freeside, this time going to the other side that wasn't turned into ghouls, I guess. Even though, once again, we see the King's school right there. So what happened to the Kings then? Did they get exiled from Freeside? What, do you think the show is gonna explain that? Of course not. They just treat it as a joke. The writers just want to spit in the face of New Vegas and its fans. Anyways, the ghoul gives a couple of caps to Lucy to get some addictol, where she also steals a power fist as a setup for another psycho bitch move she's gonna pull right by the end of this episode. Then the ghoul himself goes to a bar, where we get another lore dump. It's confirmed that Deathclaws came from Curry Junction, and for some reason they decided to attack the strip, and apparently the Securitrons weren't enough to stop them. Everyone's wiped out, the Omertas, the White Glove Society, the Chairman, they're all gone. Well, they don't spell it out, but it's clearly implied. So Todd Howard finally got his revenge on Obsidian and erased New Vegas from the canon. Anyone interesting from that game are now turned into insane cartoon villains or are just dead. Amazing. Speaking of cartoon villains, the next scene is where we finally get the confirmation on the real house that I already talked about. So long story short, the flashback scenes I've been ignoring up to this point were all about Cooper Howard scheming with Moldaver to kill Mr. House. She tells him that Vault-Tec is going to sell Cold Fusion to House, and then he has everything he needs to end the world, so we need to stop him. And Cooper Howard just believes her, because of course, House is evil, right? Everyone knew that before the war. But in the end, he gets cold feet. He doesn't actually want to kill him. He just wants to steal the cold fusion. So he goes to Mr. House's Vegas party, and he gets invited into his special room. There, House reveals that he knows Cooper was sent to kill him. House says he does not believe Vault-Tec is going to drop the bombs. He also says he is not going to drop the bombs. Then he claims that he had a camera in Cooper's power armor during the Anchorage mission, and saw the Deathclaws, and that shows there is another player at the table. So that influences the odds of when the war is going to end. Oh, did I mention that House is a polymarket trader now? He just goes on this rant about how he has this perfect algorithm to predict the future, and he just puts in all the variables, and then he can pinpoint the exact date of when the bombs are going to fall. You know, he starts to sound like a polymarket trader betting on the end of the world instead of like shithole countries getting bombed. Whatever, I'm getting ahead of myself. Then by the end he goes Andrew Ryan mode and he spurgs out on Cooper Howard and talks about how he is also going to partake in the ending of the world. I wonder what that's supposed to mean. Going back to the useless vault subplot, back with McFuckface as he leads a group of unarmed vault dwellers straight through the middle of Los Angeles wasteland, and somehow encounters zero threats, no raiders, no fiends, no mutated creatures. I guess it's Sunday and all the cannibals took the day off, right? So they casually walk their way to Vault-Tec headquarters. Now you might be wondering why they're even going there. It's because this guy, who claims to be Bud Askin's assistant, you know, the brain on a Roomba, says it's time to move on to Phase 2 of the Future Enterprise Ventures program. Then as they enter it, these creatures come to defend their roach farm that they built inside the elevator shaft. You already know this becomes a setup for another gore fest. I mean, that's basically the only thing this show has for it at this point. Then Big Schnoz finds a computer and starts searching for the FEV program he was warned about. As the insider guy conveniently sees everything through a window, and then beats the shit out of him. Now this is the same guy who proudly claims he was just a disposable corporate slave for Bud Askins and brought him lunch back in the day. Then why, after 200 years, is he still protecting the secrecy of this program? Except, I guess, if he was brainwashed by that magic device before the war. Now, as all of this is happening, Hank the Chad is perfecting his mind control device and finds the snake oil salesman from the last season to be the perfect candidate who can tolerate it. Then he sends him to Freeside to broker a deal with the Ghoul. My daughter for your family. Which, yes, they are also being held in that special management vault. So the Ghoul accepts this and reveals also that he was dragging Lucy along for a moment like this anyways, which in retrospect, now it makes sense why he didn't just end her after all this time for being a blabbering idiot. So he tranquilizes her, except of course, this is not the end. Lucy shrugs it off with cartoon logic, briefly powers through the trank, uses the stolen power fist to launch him through a window, and then he gets impaled on a fucking light pole. Are you kidding me? At this point, I'm not even surprised. It's established that he's unkillable, and he's the main character, so of course Plot Armor saves him once again, as a super mutant conveniently shows up at night, walks into Freeside and rescues him. The super mutant then talks about how ghouls and muties are the same, and should unite to defeat the Fasci Enclave. For the first time this season, they actually mentioned the Enclave, though it was obvious with all the foreshadowing, but remember, most of the people who are watching this show haven't even played a single Fallout game, so they wouldn't understand. They don't know what the Enclave is yet. So we get back to pre-war Cooper Howard one last time and see how his plan to steal the cold fusion and keep it away from Mr. House actually plays out. So he spikes pre-war Hank's drink. He's supposed to sell it to House, and tries to locate the device, but of course he can't figure it out. Conveniently, his wife suddenly shows up and shows how to extract it from his head, just like with that Enclave guy in the first episode of the very first season. Also, I forgot to mention that as it turns out, Coop's wife, Barbara, is just another pawn controlled by the Enclave, with no real agency. This is the natural conclusion of DEI, by the way. The problem with putting all the wholesome colored people in positions of power is that with great power comes great responsibility. And now all of a sudden, they have to actually be responsible for bad things happening, but you don't want that, of course, because BIPOCs are wholesome chungus. So even though she's a billionaire CEO and a strong independent woman, she is still just a slave to the patriarchy and nothing is ever her fault, and it's the Whiteys scheming in the shadows. So when she appeared at that board meeting talking about dropping the bombs, it wasn't her, it was the Enclave. Now the writers are clearly backtracking from last year's plot that the evil capitalist would end the war to make money somehow. So instead, it's the secret evil American deep state who would drop the bombs on themselves and end their own control and rule over the state, so they have to fight 200 years to get it back. Oh, of course, who am I kidding? It's not supposed to make sense. The Enclave is just a straw man for Trump, or the Mustache Man, or whatever. They're just cartoon villains like the Eggman or Dr. Claw, basically. It's exactly how they portray House, but now there are two Dr. Claws, each on their own side, fighting for their own interests. Moving on, we get to Lucy and Hank's plot. now at the special vault, and we finally see what Hank's been cooking. And all this time he was catching wastelanders to turn them into office workers? And his argument is that these people were just savages who would have killed each other a day ago, but now look at how they're working together in harmony. Isn't that amazing? Now, from the show's portrayal where everyone on the surface is incompetent, insane, or stupid, this doesn't actually look too bad. Now, of course, it's not actually the case in the canon, but this is once again how the writers shoot themselves in the foot narratively, by trying to make the evils look like being evil geniuses, when actually it just makes them the only competent people left. Now, obviously, Lucy isn't buying this at first. However, in what feels like a setup probably, but who cares at this point, it might just be real, they just have a Legion guy and an NCR guy who are still not mind-controlled, and they jump at each other like animals and just basically proving Hank's point. So she presses the mind control button, and this whole ordeal convinces Lucy that this device can be used for good, especially as she mentions they could use this on the Legion. This is just peak leftist hypocrisy, by the way. So this device that erases people's personality and turns them into robots, you know, it's immoral, it's evil, of course, but I could use it on my enemies. Wait a second, it's not that bad after all. Anyways, moving on to the next scene where we see the conclusion to the whole subplot of Inbred's Club. Oh boy, I told you it's going somewhere, buckle up. So we see during the show that the Inbred Club gets more and more popular because of course everyone in the vault is inbred, haha funny. But there's a problem. They are using a lot of food and water because they have a massive snack budget and are consuming and eating like pigs. Meanwhile, we are still in the middle of the water crisis. So the Overseer, the wise black woman, eventually crashes out and wants to shut it down. So she sends in the SWAT team. And this is where we get to the point, the reason why they were building up all of this for the whole season.
We are working very hard on solving the water issue. What we need is time. And I'm sorry, but you don't get extra rations because of who your parents were.
Actually, this is still America, so yes, you do. Right? Our ancestors put themselves first. And you know what? That worked out for them.
So this rich guy is supposed to be Trump? I mean, it couldn't just be me who's seeing this, right? I'm not a schizo, I swear. He's saying this is America, we do whatever we want to do, and then everybody else in the club are just inbred MAGA supporters. And this whole water chip thing is an allegory for global warming or something? See, Chads, you didn't vote for wise Kamala, so now the world is going to burn. Like, mark my word, next season he's gonna run for Vault Overseer and it becomes another shit show. Let's just move on, I don't care anymore. Episode 7 starts by building up on the other Vault subplot. Yes, I know, I totally ignored it until this point because I don't care, I hate this. Anyways, it's all about the Cyclops bitch from the last season. Yes, she actually is an important character, wowie zowie. And it's because she's a Canadian? Her name in the show is Stephanie Harper, clearly a nod to Stephen Harper, the former Canadian Prime Minister. Now, I think this was supposed to be an Easter egg, but it was hiding all this time for a whole year, but no one cared enough about this show to go and dig it up and, like, find these stuff. Anyways, long story short, it turns out she's a badass who was fighting the Americans invading her country. Wow.
Don't think of them as human beings. Think of them as Americans.
Dude, the Canadians are truly buck-broken. Somehow Americans, who are white Anglo-Saxons just like you, are evil invaders and have to be killed. Meanwhile, 6 Gorillian Indians can be airdropped into Canada, and they become Canadians as soon as they touch your magic soil. Anyways, what was this show about? Yeah, Fallout. See guys, it's not my fault. I don't want to talk about politics, it's just that this show is filled to the brim with everything that was in the political zeitgeist recently, that I just can't ignore it. Anyways, back to the Cyclops. It turns out, yes, she is also from the past. It feels like nobody in this show was actually born in the wasteland. They all had the magical Fallout 4 cryopods, preserving them perfectly until today. Again, I'm gonna say what's been said ad nauseum at this point, and it's the fact that Bethesda never understood that Fallout is supposed to be post-apocalypse. But instead, Bethesda Fallout games are always enslaved to the past. They keep recycling old conflicts, they never let the wasteland itself come up with its own political solutions and create a new world. No, there should always be something from the past to come and ruin it all. Anyways, remember this guy, the cuck who's raising someone else's baby for her? So many cuck characters in this show. He figures out who she actually is over time. First, she kills a fat guy, who cares? Why are there fat people in the vaults anyways? Don't they supposed to be rationing food? How did they survive for 200 years if they allow fat people to exist? Don't think about it, moving on. She also wants to marry the Beta Box Deluxe, and eventually the cuck finally musters the courage to call her out during the ceremony, by revealing that she's a Canadian and also happened to kill one of their fellow vault dwellers. So she runs back to his office and is forced to implement the final solution, which is inside this box that originally belonged to Hank, and we'll get to in the next episode. For now, let's wrap up the other flashback scene from Cooper Howard. So now he has the cold fusion and sets up a meeting with the congresswoman who was supposedly anti-corporate influence. He thinks he can trust her and decides to hand her the device. Then she suggests giving it to the president instead. So as we see, House's prophecy comes true, and he just puts the key to ending the world in the hands of the Enclave themselves. Wow, isn't it so genius, guys? The House always wins, but the House wasn't actually Mr. House, it was Enclave all along. Then, we go back to Lucy and Hank. And what's going to happen here is going to reveal the core propaganda message that the writers wanted to imply. So at this point, Lucy seems to be mostly convinced that what her father is doing isn't all that bad. So they just sit down and have dinner, as the now brainwashed NCR guy comes to serve the table. The same guy that she saw all the way back in episode 2. So she starts to chat him up and talk about whether he remembers her or not, and since he answers like a robot, she starts to get cold feet again about this whole brainwashing thing, even though, may I remind you once again, she was totally fine with the fact that it did the same thing to the Legion guy. Anyways, Hank notices what's going on, so he interjects to say this.
New California Republic. Just like the Legion. They all have their problems, Lucy. High taxes, expansionist tendencies, unpopular foreign policy, trust me. You'll understand when you're older.
I think I do understand. One side is murdering people, enslaving them, crucifying them, and the other side is just vaguely problematic.
Yes, this whole season was building up tension to make a point about this Reddit tier argument. I told you this since the very beginning. This whole show exists only to be a vehicle for modern-day leftist propaganda. They massacred Fallout, and it's canon for this. This is supposed to be an allegory for the 2024 election, just to say the American voters are stupid inbred chuds who didn't want to vote for the slightly flawed brown woman over the literal orange Hitler. How dare you say they're the same thing? And of course, because she got brainwashed by Moldaver into thinking that the NCR is the ultimate good, even though she herself hasn't lived a day under NCR rule. Meanwhile, people on the surface who did all have a more nuanced opinion.
Was a prospector until I decided to settle here to get away from the NCR. Now we'll just take it easy and help out with the Brahmin and Bighorners. Don't get me wrong. The NCR's got a lot of decent folk in it. It's just that they make you part of them whether you like it or not. Towns like Goodsprings and Prim don't stay independent for long. Not if you've got something the NCR wants. Still, the NCR keeps the Legion away.
The new California Republic. Bunch of settlers and soldiers coming in from the west, fixing on making Nevada their own. They can be right pushy, but the roads are safer because of them, so I tend to let it go. Not that I got a choice.
But as we are about to see in the next scene, the NCR is now retconned into being loved by everyone, so let's get into it. So Maximus decides that Lucy is the most qualified person in the whole wasteland to have the cold fusion. And as him and his bud were traveling down from Area 51 to find Lucy, they happen to find Dogmeat, who was following them all the way back from episode 2 where he was lost. How did he run for probably days and found their track? Who knows? I guess this is a jab at how small Bethesda Fallout maps are. Anyways, point here is that this is all a setup, so the ghoul also finds them. He shows up and somehow magically knows that they have the cold fusion, demands it, and says in return for giving it to him, he's going to lead Max to Lucy. And eventually, the entire plot of this season was leading to this point, the ghoul getting the cold fusion again to undo his mistake from the past. Which is funny because he almost got it in the last season, you know, when he was one-shotting Brotherhood power armor guys by hitting them in the weak spot. Oh, I'm not gonna even get into that. But of course, the cold fusion had to fall into the hands of the Brotherhood instead, otherwise how would they get the chance to destroy and humiliate them in this season? Anyways, let's get to the actual stupid part of this episode. So now they found an untouched weapon shack with an NCR power armor in it, and of course none of that got looted. Duh. So now all three of them go back to Vegas to finally fight the Deathclaws in the Strip. And as they walk through Freeside, they are met with overwhelming support and cheers from everyone, just because Maximus is wearing an NCR power armor. Yes, NCR is retconned into being a universally loved faction, even though they were so incompetent that they couldn't actually protect Vegas, and now it's infested with Deathclaws. Also, they couldn't protect their own capital. And now there's only 2 of them left in this whole region, but no, people love them, as they've always did apparently. Well, let's just look at what the king has to say about them.
A lot of folks around these parts who've been here a while resent the sheer number of people that have come into the area since the Strip was built. In turn, the newcomers, most of whom come from the NCR, have gotten ornery from being resented. Sometimes things get violent.
Anyways, next is the fight scene with Maximus and the Deathclaws, as he opens the path for the ghoul to get to Lucky 38, which is all he wanted anyways, so he just leaves Max to wrestle with the rest of the Deathclaws. But then Max gets thrown by one of them and crashes into the barricade door into Freeside and opens it up. At the same time, the ghoul powers up Lucky 38 with the cold fusion thing and brings House back to life. Wowie zowie. Now you might be wondering what's happening on Lucy's side of the story right now. You're not, I know. Me neither. Anyways, after her crash out, she finally decides to stop the brainwashing device. So she opens the door to the room where the main core of the system is, and inside, there's a head in a jar? Wait, and it's the same congresswoman from all those flashbacks? Now you might be wondering, what even is this? What's happening here? Well, it turns out it's just another stupid joke. She just happens to be the perfect manager with the perfect Myers-Briggs personality type. So her consciousness is being used to train an algorithm that runs the brainwashing chips. Are you kidding me? What did they do to Fallout? It's so over! It's so fucking over! And somehow she's still conscious and begs to be killed by Lucy. I don't care anymore, I just want to be done with this. Let's get to the last episode and see how they ruined the rest of it. So, finally, we reach the finale, where most of the remaining plot threads are resolved. Starting of course with the Legion, where the Home Alone kid finally manages to get Caesar's corpse. And we're gonna see what's written in his will. Once again, this show actively insults the intelligence of anyone who ever played New Vegas and understands what the Legion actually was about. Caesar was not an idiot. Sure, he was brutal, but if he and his faction was actually this idiotic, then how come the oh-so-civilized and intelligent NCR is struggling against them and can't just wipe them out? Caesar grew up in NCR territory, by the way. He read books about Rome, and he consciously modeled the Legion on his own interpretation of Roman statecraft. So of course he would choose an heir for himself. He wants his empire to continue. Again, a system like this doesn't function if everyone involved is a frothing lunatic. Otherwise, why would a character like Joshua Graham ever be part of them? Did you notice that the show ignores him entirely? Why? Because he doesn't fit in the agenda of the writers. You know, just even suggesting that maybe the wasteland needs Jesus to be re-civilized and re-establish the moral order, like how Rome turned from a civilization that killed Christ into a civilization that became Christian. But of course, you cannot have a redemption or character development for the Legion. No, because they represent the Chuds or La Evil Fascies or something. And the showrunner's view towards them is literally genocidal. Anyways, moving on. The Home Alone kid just devours Caesar's will because he wants to pretend to be the chosen heir, and everybody just believes him, of course, and they reunite under this new Caesar. And the first order of business is to go and take over the Strip? Do they even know what the original conflict of New Vegas was about? No, the words Hoover Dam are not even mentioned once this entire season. And I don't need to even explain the importance of it. Not only it's a massive powerhouse, but also provides clean water. Both things that might be incredibly useful for the wasteland, maybe? Whatever, I give up. Anyways, the Legion has a massive army coming towards the Strip right now. But wait, this is not right. In my heckin' soy Marvel movies, whenever the bad guys rise, the heroes also conveniently come back to resist them, so something's missing here. Well, don't you worry, they got that one covered. As we go back to Freeside, where Max is busy wrestling Deathclaws, while Freeside people start betting on him losing? Dude, forget about the FEV. I guess the Enclave has made a new airborne virus that drops the IQ of everyone on the surface by 20 points, because otherwise none of this makes any sense. How did these people even survive this long if they had room temperature IQ? Anyways, Max actually starts losing the fight, his power armor gets destroyed, and right as he's about to get killed, our Marvel superheroes come back out of nowhere to save the day. Now you might be asking, wait, weren't they wiped out and had like 2 people in the whole region? Now they have an entire army. What happened? who knows? Maybe they collected the Infinity Stones off screen and now they're back to be the generic good guys. Believe it or not, Geneva Robertson, who is one of the writers of this show, co-wrote the screenplay of Captain Marvel. Now it all starts to make sense, right? Anyways, let's just get back to the ghoul and wrap this up. So it turns out Mr. House has a hidden entrance into this Vault-Tec special vault that he carved out for himself. Apparently, he has a backdoor built into everything that happens on the strip, and he even rigs the slot machines? You know, this one is one step too much. You can turn House into this Andrew Ryan-esque supervillain, but he is not a scammer, okay? The scene itself is just House and the ghoul walking down a comically long hallway, and the entire purpose of it is just another lore dump. This time, it's the big reveal that the Enclaves is behind everything. The game was rigged from the start. No way! Yeah, there's no surprise in this unless you're a troglodyte who somehow missed the 11-foot-tall, Enclave-shaped elephant in the room after all the foreshadowing. Yeah, they did it again. They made it all about Enclave. And the thing is, New Vegas explicitly mocked this idea. It treated the Enclave as what they actually are at this point, which are just some paranoid boomers hiding in bunkers, still scheming, still convinced they matter, while having zero influence because they don't participate in the actual politics of the wasteland anymore. Because nobody can win a war without making alliances. They're relics, and the show just drags them back anyways. Then we cut back to Lucy's side of the plot, where Hank suddenly shows up, having somehow freed himself off screen. He just magically bends the handcuffs and escapes, I guess. So he finds Lucy and immediately starts berating her for shutting down the mind control thing. And in a last-ditch effort, he tries to unlip-tart his daughter by lobotomizing her too. But right as he's about to put the chip on her, the ghoul shows up out of nowhere and finds Lucy and Hank struggling. He just shoots Hank in the foot, hands Lucy a small gun, because it's her choice what to do with him, and then just moves on with his business. Now the psycho bitch that she is, she decides not to kill him, but instead put the chip on him. So now, she can turn him into an NCR-loving shitlib. But of course, before doing that, she wants to know the truth first, asking why did he nuke Shady Sands, what's gonna happen to the vault? And here Hank says probably the worst line in this whole show.
You think this is the real world? The surface is the experiment, not the vaults.
This is so ignorant and stupid, and it's on purpose. They are just doubling down on the whole idea of surface people were the poor in the past who couldn't get into the vaults, and the vaulties are rich and had the privilege of being lab rats for horrific science experiments. Wow, that makes a lot of sense. Yet another line from the show that destroys the entire fabric of the Fallout lore. And in the end, he doesn't tell the whole truth anyways. See, he had one of those remotes too. So instead of answering anything, he just brainwashes himself. He erases his own memory to protect the secrets of the Enclave from his daughter. Think about how insane that is for a second. He won't even know who his daughter is anymore. Why would he be so selflessly loyal to the Enclave, especially when he keeps saying that he did everything for his daughter? Again, I guess Hank was simply too base for this show. He was about to become another Homelander-like character, so they had to just erase his character like this. And finally, we get to the last scene of the show where the ghoul gets to his goal. But of course not. What? You thought it was going to resolve anything? No. If it did, how would they squeeze 10 seasons out of this? The show follows the logic of a superhero movie, where Batman catches the Joker and locks him up in the Arkham Asylum. But shoot, then how are we gonna have a reason to make another Batman movie? Because he needs a Joker again as the antagonist, so surprise, the Joker escapes Arkham. So you continuously consume the slop. So the same thing happens here. The ghoul's family isn't there. Why? Because the Enclave came and took them, I guess, off screen. And they left behind a Colorado postcard inside the cryopod. So now we know where the next season is going to be. After all, Bethesda games ruined the East Coast. This show ruined the West Coast, and now it's time to go and ruin the Heartlands, right? Now you might be thinking, okay, House is clearly against Enclave now, and he can be a useful ally in defeating the Enclave, so is he gonna join the crew and be the talking head inside a Pip-Boy or something? No. The ghoul just ditches House, meaning he was just a member-berry thing for this season only. They just used his character to lure in New Vegas fans and want to bury him with the rest of New Vegas. Oh, and did I mention, for absolutely no reason at all, we got this plot twist that the Canadian hoe is actually Hank's wife. What does this add to the plot? Nothing. It's just more foid slop melodrama for the women in the audience, I guess. And now she's part of the Enclave too, so that makes for another cliffhanger for the next season. And what was inside the box that belonged to Hank? An Enclave Pip-Boy. Wowie zowie. And with it, she kicks off Phase 2, which again, we're not told what it is, it's just the Phase 2 of something. Because that's the point. None of this follows any logic, it's just another reminder that, surprise, the Enclave is back. The whole point of this show was to make everything you did in the games meaningless. Your decisions as the courier in New Vegas, or what the Vault Dwellers went through in Fallout 3 and Fallout 4, none of that matters anymore. Why? Because they turned the Enclave into this conspiratorial, all-knowing power that planned everything from the start. Hank saying the surface is the experiment was the it was all in the head, or it's all a simulation moment for the writing of this show. And it's on purpose. The showrunners knew that people would be complaining all the time about where the show is going, and they'll keep asking about how it connects to the games. So they decide to just sidestep the problem entirely. By overriding the stakes of the games, they positioned the show as the definitive layer of reality in the Fallout canon. It's not adapting it, it's just asserting control over it. Also, by turning every other faction into incompetent retards, the show accidentally makes the Enclave look like the best option. I mean, I'm pretty sure they can detect and stop a nuke coming into their base, unlike the NCR. And they have better looking power armor than the Brotherhood, so... Wait a second, are we supposed to hate the Enclave again? They are the only ones left with a plan for the Wasteland, and reuniting America. And with the Cold Fusion, they can probably do it in less than 50 years or so. They just want to kill everyone on the surface for it, but is it really a bad thing when everyone up there is portrayed as violent cannibals? So why wouldn't you just go and join the wait a second.
I was suggesting we bomb Shady Sands. I was suggesting that we blow up the Legion. I was suggesting we brainwash the savages on the surface.
There is no moral center on the surface. When in the last 2 centuries have the NCR or the Brotherhood or the Legion looked at a way to unify that continent? Only reason anything is happening now is because the Enclave is understanding her role.
Kept you waiting, huh?